Steal the key, find the vault, and escape with the treasure. That's the idea behind Sumo Digital's brand new 4v4 heist game, Hood, Outlaws And Legends. But will our foray into this Robin Hood-inspired world live up to the hype, or will it be just another live service game destined to fail? Hey there friends, it's Livid here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and today we're diving into Hood, Outlaws And Legends to find out if it's truly worth your time. As always, we have to start with a 30,000-foot view, because without perspective, video game reviews are kind of pointless. Hood, Outlaws And Legends looks to continue the legacy of the heist genre by pitting teams of 4 against each other in a medieval fantasy world inspired by the legends of Robin Hood. Each match is broken into 3 distinct yet seamless phases. In the first phase, players need to steal a key from the sheriff, a hulking knight that will one-shot any player within reach. With the key secured, the next step is to locate the vault, which can spawn in one of a few predetermined locations. Once you unlock the door, you enter phase 3, also called extraction. From here, it's a matter of walking a heavy treasure chest to a winch point, usually located towards the edge of the map. Once there, teams will fight to extract the chest by cranking away on the winch until eventually the treasure is extracted and a team wins. During the entire heist, you'll be playing as one of 4 character classes. Robin the Ranger, capable of taking down enemies with a single headshot. Marianne the Huntress, capable of stealthily assassinating guards and players alike. Jon the Brawler, that wields a mighty hammer and smashes skulls with a single blow. And Tooke, the Mystic that provides the team with both frontline offense and insight. Each class feels distinctly different, and because there are no limitations on who or how many of these characters you have on a team, there's a lot of room for experimentation and team comp trial and error. Each match starts the same, with teams spawning at the extreme outskirts of the map. Players can choose to stealthily take out guards and AI-controlled enemies, or just go in loud, cause a ruckus in hopes that they'll be able to reach the sheriff before the enemy team. Your actions have consequences, and if guards spot you, you'll be visible to the enemy team, making it that much more challenging to accomplish your goals. Areas can even go into lockdown, closing off routes critical to your success. When confrontations escalate, it's a whirlwind of bodies and steel, as players and NPCs clash over respawn points, resources like equipment and ammo, and of course, the all-important treasure. This is ultimately where we start to come off the tracks. Hood's concept is brilliant and the main selling point of the game, but the execution is flawed. We have to step through this piece by piece because together they create an experience that just leaves you wishing the game was just a bit more refined. First are the maps. At launch, there are a small handful, and in terms of balance and design, they're really enjoyable. By focusing on the state's influence over each area, the levels are allowed to keep their Robin Hood charm, while also feeling large scale. Massive keeps, underground crypts. The team has done a really great job designing maps that challenge your thinking as a player. How you get around is a big factor in the success of a heist, and because each class has a different aptitude when it comes to moving and fighting on the battlefield, things always seem to stay in motion. The trouble is when the map design begins to brush up against the gameplay elements, specifically in Phase 3, the extraction. Now some maps feature extraction points near unflippable spawn points, and this can cause all sorts of bottlenecking. It's somewhat alleviated by a smart team that knows how to back capture respawn locations. But those set initial spawn points never change, and this can often lead to a frustrating endgame experience where players just camp and rush at each other until someone inevitably gets the win. This point is emphasized by the sheer number of ammo and gear crates scattered around the map. In our opinion, there are just way too many, and that can lead to more frustration than anything else. Smart players learn the maps quickly, but if explosives and ammunition are always just a few steps away, it puts less of an emphasis on the skillful nature of the game and more on the action. Now, that's not inherently bad, but like I said, if the end of the game is just 2 teams standing around a point, swinging wildly at each other, well, you can see how unlimited anything might be a problem. The second core issue here is the combat, which is really the low point of the game. Now the classes do feel objectively different, which is a testament to the design choices the developers made, but there are just too many issues with the actual fighting and balance of the classes at this point. I say this point because Hood is a live service game. The team has already laid out 3 complete seasons with a road for new content, but in our opinion, there are some foundational things that just need to be revisited. For instance, during a team fight, players can simply get behind you, crouch, and assassinate you at any time. It's a one-shot mechanic that can come out of nowhere and takes almost no skill. It can completely change the momentum of a team fight and is one of those systems that can derail your entire experience with the game. Luckily, I think there are some simple things the developers could do to alleviate this, but hopefully that happens sooner rather than later, because I think this is one aspect of combat that will turn a lot of players off. Continuing to drill down on the combat, there's just a jankiness to each of the characters that most players will feel right off the bat. Couple that with some major balance issues between the melee and the range classes, and you've got yourself a pretty big problem. A clear example of this is when we took our squad and stacked 3 brawlers and a ranger. Now this formula completely overwhelmed most teams we encountered, and even the teams that beat us did so by the skin of their teeth, often by getting that last notch of a winch, not outright beating us throughout the entire rest of the match. Now the parry and dodge mechanic also needs some work, and honestly there's not much more to say about it. The parry feels incredibly slow, and while it is effective, there is a stiffness to it that just doesn't feel good. In the same vein, the dodge, it's kind of a joke. Most melee classes can simply keep rushing a dodging player to get a quick kill, and while I understand this is kind of how the relationship is supposed to be, it's far from perfect. Now again, I want to double down on what I said before. The 4 classes play and feel unique, and that is absolutely incredible. When you don't have one of the 4 classes, you feel the difference, not only in the combat, but how you have to approach the different scenarios in the game. If you don't have a Tooke, well, forget about healing. And the same thing goes for Jon, who's able to lift open portcullis gates that have been closed during lockdown. The devs really need to lay into this element of the game and make these classes more valuable in their own right. There's always going to be a meta, that's just the nature of competitive games. But if we can get closer to some sort of through-line balance, well, I think the experience is going to be more enjoyable across the board, especially when new characters get added later on. Finally, the third core problem with the game, and this really boils down to some of the PVE and gameplay choices underlying the entire experience. The first of which is respawns. Simply put, the timers are too short, and don't do enough to punish players that push aside the stealth and skill for a more bullish approach. There are ways to combat this by actively capping respawns that would allow an enemy to just keep rushing you, but here again, the balance is off, and it tilts in favor of players that just charge in with no regards for anything other than in-your-face combat. A great idea that we saw floating around the internet already would be to reward players for making smart plays like taking out guards quietly. Kill a guard without alerting the area and remove a second from your respawn timer. Something to that effect. On the flip side, if you run into an area and alert every guard around, well, maybe just keep stacking a bit of seconds on the respawn timer. It's just an idea, but it's a simple enough fix that would push players toward a more skillful approach to the game, something the developers clearly want to happen, but just isn't. One other aspect of the game that just isn't quite right is the sheriff. Now don't get me wrong, he's a force to be reckoned with, and he will one-shot you if you get too close. But the way he puts pressure on the players just doesn't work, especially in Phase 3. If he's around the winch point, he's a massive pain, and even if you try to kite him away, he'll most likely just end up right back on top of the chest and piss off both teams. Not in a fun, challenging kind of way, but more of a, wow, this is really annoying kind of way. The second issue here is that he's probably the dumbest enemy of the lot. He is a constant threat, and that's good, but because he just slowly moves towards players Mr. X style, there's not really enough going on that forces anyone to change their approach to the game. In our opinion, the sheriff should be a game-changing threat that forces both teams to deal with him, but right now, he's more of a joke than anything else that can just be evaded. Finally, we have to talk about Phase 3, which is honestly the main issue with the game, straight up. Extracting the chest is a great concept, but there are just too many issues that all directly tie into this one phase that make it the central problem with Hood. I can't tell you how many times we lost the game because a team wiped us right at the very end of the final phase and managed to extract the chest during that last little hurdle. Your team can do everything right, steal the key quietly and find the vault undetected and get the last chest to the extraction point, but if the enemy team gets that last little crank on the winch, they win. I mean, what? You do get rewards for other things within the game, so it's not a complete wash, but talk about taking the wind out of the team's sails, especially after a great round. Again, we think there is a simple solution here. The developers could opt for a more tug-of-war style system where the winch completely resets depending on what team is using it, or force the opposition team to move the chest to another winch before extraction. There are options here, and let me be clear, other aspects of the game also feed into Phase 3 problems. So we're talking about layers of complexity that ultimately holds back the entire experience. For each round of Hood you complete, you'll get to spend some gold upgrading your hideout and unlocking new perks and cosmetics. The way the team handles this is really neat. You get gold from a match regardless if you win or lose, and at the end of the match, you have to choose whether you put that gold into your own pocket to unlock things, or into your hideout to try and level it up and unlock newer options that you can spend money to unlock later. Now, there are some gameplay progression elements in the game, and usually in a PvP game, that can spell disaster. But honestly, Kodiak and myself don't mind the implementation. Each character can equip one perk in one of 3 slots. And while these do change your gameplay and favor players that have put more playtime under their belts, the way the developers have designed these perks don't outright tip the scales of balance that drastically. For instance, you may get some sort of buff, but there is usually a negative component to the perk that offsets that advantage. I should also point out that unlocking these isn't incredibly hard, and for the most part, players will have access to these on the character of their choosing after just a few days of casually playing Hood. The other side of progression, the cosmetics, is also perfectly fine. And while the character models and cosmetics themselves won't blow anyone away, we do feel they fit the vibe of the game, which is important. Too often in a medieval game, the developers try and weave in looks that are just way too far removed, taking players out of that element. I know it's a small aspect of the game, but these things matter to certain groups of players. The last few minor things that we experienced that might turn players off to the game is a lack of a ranked mode and a frame rate locked at around 60 FPS. Now, these weren't huge sticking points to us personally, but we've heard our fair share of players who take issue with the game based on that alone, so it's worth mentioning. Don't forget, as a live service game, these things can all change, but this review is based on the day one product. Now, Hood, Outlaws and Legends is a brilliant concept. Take an idea like Robin Hood, something that transcends generations, and create a compelling competitive game around that core idea. It's brilliant, but as is often the case with video games, a good concept can't be propped up by bad execution. Which is why, when asked the question, is Hood, Outlaws and Legends worth your time? We have to give it a maybe. Are we having fun with the game? Yes, and to say we aren't would be a straight up lie. But there are a number of fundamental issues with Hood that is keeping us from recommending it outright. One of the biggest saving graces is that the game is only $30, which is honestly the right price to pay for a game of this caliber. Anything more, and I think a lot of people would feel cheated. But if the devs double down on refinement and listen to the community to improve the game, there is definitely hope for some long-term success here. We hope this video helped you figure out if Hood, Outlaws and Legends is worth your time. If you enjoyed this series and want more worth your time videos in your feed, go ahead and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing to Legacy Gaming. If you choose to pick it up, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the game, either in the comments below or head on over to our Discord. Our community of nearly 7,000 members is spread across dozens of fantastic games. So if you're looking for some awesome people to hang out with who enjoy games, stay up to date on our videos and consider becoming part of the Legacy. Finally, if you like our channel and are a fan of what we stand here for at Legacy Gaming, you can even help us out by becoming a member. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you're helping evolve the channel and build a better community. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Livid, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.